Ritali is our next speaker, and she is a rising junior from the Bay Area and loves exploring business intelligence, technology, policy, communication, strategy, and data analysis. She runs several nonprofits and groups, including Evergreen Tennis and Next Gen Innovators, and she loves using leadership to make an impact.
Yeah, thank you for introducing me. So I want to begin by asking each of you a question. Do you consider yourself to be more creative than the average person? And I'm going to bet that most of you are going to say yes. But interestingly, a study has found that people are going to say that they are above average. And the vast majority do this, even though this is statistically not true, right? And so this is actually resulting from an illusion, the illusion of superiority and the illusion of control. This is because humans don't like to look at the whole picture, or we don't just in general. Instead, we focus on ourselves. We focus on what we know, we focus on what we do, we focus on what we want. But in this process, we neglect what we don't know. We neglect the factor of luck in many situations. And the same goes for entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs naturally focus on themselves, on their plan, on their goals, on their immediate threats and opportunities. But we know that there's a field out there called behavioral economics. And it talks about how humans are irrational. That's the essence of this field. So even though each and every one of us thinks that we are logical, we need to realize that there are biases and heuristics out there which cause us to make failures in our decision. And so it's essential that we as entrepreneurs learn about these different biases so that we can overcome them and make better decisions. So let's begin with the first instance of Shark Tank. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this show. And we see these entrepreneurs come in with their companies, and the investors often tell them that, hey, you have a crazy valuation. And so the question really becomes, why are these entrepreneurs overvaluing their companies so much? And the result is due to endowment effect. The reason why entrepreneurs overvalue their companies on Shark Tank is because the company belongs to them. And the endowment effect states that people have a tendency to overvalue things that they own more than they would value things that they don't own. So let's think about the implication for an early startup. People have a new idea and they love it so much because they came up with it. But if you go out to the market, it's likely that the customer and the market isn't going to be as attached to your idea because you're simply overvaluing it due to the endowment effect. Yet, even if we go out to the market and we decide to implement a process of customer discovery, does that mean the endowment effect goes away? Maybe, but there's another bias which comes in our way, and that is the confirmation bias. The confirmation bias states that people tend to interpret information in a way that aligns with their existing beliefs. So an entrepreneur who goes out to the market might love to listen from all the positive reviews that the customers give, but they might dismiss the negative information and the critical criticism that might be the turning point for their company. And it's not intentional, but it's simply a bias which exists within humans and in our decision making. And because we often dismiss information that doesn't align with our beliefs, this can cause problems down the road. And so when we eventually find these problems, for instance, later on in your startup, you might realize that you don't have paying customers. And right now, if I were to ask you all what we should do, I'm sure we would come to a consensus that this startup needs to pivot. However, when you're actually in that position, you have yet another bias in your path, and that is the sunk cost fallacy. The sunk cost fallacy states that because you've put in so much time and effort and resources, you don't want to let go. So let's step back from the business instance for a second. Have you ever ordered so much food that you can't finish it but you still keep eating even though you're full and it still makes you feel worse, this is exactly the sunk cost fallacy. Pressing on even when it's not rational. And in the business instance, we can see this through another hypothetical scenario. If a company spent $50 million on a project which was failing, and they have another $60 million to invest, should they use that money to salvage this failing project, or should they use it towards another project which has a higher return on investment? Again, we all know the correct answer, but in that position, the sunk cost fallacy plays in and causes us to continue even when it's not rational. And so, as we can see from these three instances and biases that entrepreneurs are going to encounter in their startup journeys, we realize that behavioral economics is all around us, everywhere in our lives. And to overcome this, we need to not only explore behavioral economics and learn to recognize different behavioral biases, but it is essential that we also learn to seek honest feedback. We need to find a devil's advocate that can ensure that we don't fall prey to these biases. Because even when we know about them, we're still susceptible to them. And it's essential that we find a mechanism for ourselves that can help us counter these biases and make better decisions. Thank you.